So John McDonough brought up a really interesting point in the comments, talking about believing that the 2016 election was interfered with in some way, let's say. I agree. And so does the vast majority of the world. It's just a statement of fact that the 2016 election was interfered with. By the way, so was the 2020 election. We are in conflict with Russia right now. We have been in conflict with Russia every year Putin has been in power. That needs to be understood by you and me. All Americans should be aware of this. In fact, around the world, particularly if you are a NATO member nation, a hell of a mouthful, your elections are influenced in some way by Russia, and you are in conflict with Russia. It's not the same thing as being at war. And we shouldn't treat it like we're at war, but we should treat it accurately like we are in conflict with them. What is the difference? We're not shooting bullets at each other, but we are taking steps to harm the other. Russia has something called the Web Brigade, which it has used to great effect. It's been studied. It was used in 2016, and brace yourselves, because it's going to be hard to hear, to support Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Think about that. It's true. Here's something hard for me to swallow, but it is fact. I'm a massive fan of Bernie Sanders. I became a true believer in progressive values. Not so. I became a true believer in voting for progressives in 2016, in part thanks to Russia. What happens is and it's going to increase exponentially with AI now, but they hire or force or do whatever Russians do, a bunch of people called the Web Brigade, these are government employees, to go into forums of countries that they disagree with and instigate, be trolls, essentially, on behalf of the most extreme candidates. Now, to Russia's dismay, Bernie Sanders was about the best thing that ever happened to American politics. Bernie Sanders had a plan that a whole lot of people are now behind. But the purpose was to cause chaos. And I'm convinced that Putin did not think he could actually get Trump elected. But it was wildly successful, way more successful than it had ever been before. He did get Trump elected. And that resulted in this situation. Right, John?
Just off on a bit of a tangent, because, Trump and DeSantis is doing it as well now, claims that he could sort out this whole war in one or two phone calls. Well, we know what that's going to be. It's going to be a phone call to Putin and a phone call to Zelensky, and he's going to say to Putin, okay, you can have this much land, and Zelensky, this is what you've got to be happy with. I mean, what's the deal here? Because I believe, and I actually blame Donald Trump for this war. I think that his relationships with Russia and the way he ran the US on the world stage very much kind of are the reason that this war happened, or part.
Just very quickly, want to say this is 5-Minute News, the weekend show. Link to the full interview is in the description. On the Midas Touch Network, 5-Minute News, I think, may be one of the best overall productions. If you're only going off the opinions of the host and the ability to interview, it's got fantastic interviews. I love all the rest for various reasons. Midas Touch, great network overall, but 5-Minute News, check it out for sure. starring this man whose scalp is a vision of my near future.
Part of the reason that this war happened. Can you just explain that to people? Because I don't think it's very easy to make the correlation between, Trump being the instigator for Russia invading Ukraine.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you go back to the, even in late 15, early 16, when the Republican National Committee platform was being hammered out, there was a lot of jostling and jockeying about what the platform would say vis-a-vis Ukraine and toning down the language in terms of giving Ukraine defensive weapons at the time. And that was really watered down. And then you had Trump throughout his presidency signaling that, he was not going to push back against Putin very strongly. He was constantly questioning the value of NATO, whether or not the U.S., when he was on the campaign trail, he made statements about, I don't know whether or not that the United States would honor its mutual defense obligations to NATO if NATO were attacked. So do
you remember when he was saying that stuff? There were so many folks that wrote it up, at first, including myself. I might have touched on this in an article for an official news station. I'll have to look back at my sordid past. But there was a lot of folks that chalked it all up to ignorance, to bloviating, to not being part of a plan. But very quickly we realized, oh yeah, Trump has business ties in Russia. I think we underestimate how much Trump considered Putin to be responsible for his election as president. Remember that he full on, in front of a podium into a microphone with national TV cameras running, he begged Russia to hack the emails of a political opponent. And they complied that night. Reporting appears to have verified a Russian IP address hacked Hillary Clinton's emails. Another thing we need to remember: I'm the most guilty of this of all. In fact, I just did it. Constantly say, this happened on national television, this crime, and yet we can't prove it? We can't find where he said it behind the scenes? Here's the rough thing to get. He never says this stuff behind the scenes. Or rather, let me take that back. He never has to say this stuff behind the scenes. If he does it publicly, the people who he needs to hear the message. How often did we say that Fox News had an audience of 1 on some of its broadcasts? Yeah. Just like the mob passing messages back and forth over public phone lines using coded language, Trump makes his requests of these people publicly. Now that you know that, pay attention to what Ron DeSantis is doing here as well. Because I think you'll find both of these people are trying to work with, let's call it what it is, an enemy of the nation, a NATO adversary. Even if we're not at war, we are still in conflict with them. We are still at odds. What is good for us, they consider bad for them. So pay attention to what Trump and Ron DeSantis are saying here as they run for president. They're pretending to talk to the American people who they know either don't give a damn about this or are on their side. Because the people that do give a damn will not take what they're saying seriously. Unless, have a look.
Before he was president, he was saying things that were deeply undermining of the NATO relationship and of broadly the United States relationship with Western Europe and the EU. And that continued when he was in the presidency. And if certainly, most famously, of course, telling Zelensky, conditioning aid, defensive aid, on a political favor, specifically against Biden. And I think Putin saw this, and people say, well, Putin didn't invade, right? Well, he didn't need to. I mean, he had Crimea at the time, but the things that Putin was achieving just by having Trump in power, I think the question was when he left, how much the Europeans, after 4 years of Trump, felt they could or could not count on the U.S. for assistance. And then certainly you're right, to the extent that after they've gone in, there is any proposal to solve Ukraine in 24 hours. The only way you're going to do that is by telling Ukraine, you have to accept giving up some territory, not just Crimea, but other territory, because there's no other way that Putin's going to settle for that. So I think what's interesting in this is certainly there is so much writing from a Russian perspective, but also, frankly, from a Ukrainian one, so much writing on this next election that I expect to see the amount of interference and activity that we're going to see out of Russia, to some extent Ukraine, but Russia has many more resources in this regard, from intelligence operations, from sort of disinformation and perception management type activities. It is hugely in Putin's interest to get Trump and or DeSantis, who are parroting this line about solving the problem in 24 hours, hugely in their interest to elect the Republican candidate.
Okay. So DeSantis said he's going to solve this in 24 hours. I think he was saying Trump said the same thing. What does solve it in 24 hours really mean? Peter Strzok just laid it out. By the way, here's a man with experience. Here's a guy that in any other past scenario I'd be in direct odds with. They're going to solve it in 24 hours, they say. What does that mean? Literally, that means that they're going to stop helping Ukraine and give chunks of it, which we don't have a right to give. Our only question right now is, are we going to be allies or not? They're going to broker a deal with Russia to give chunks of Ukraine to Russia. In exchange for what? In exchange for help winning the 2024 election. We're going to see, as what Strzok is laying out here, they've just made an offer to Russia. They're appealing to Russia. They're appealing to Russia over the American people. When they say, I'm going to wrap this up in 24 hours, who's that for? When DeSantis says there's going to be no boots on the ground, nobody was talking about sending U.S. soldiers to fight in Ukrainian war. I, frankly, would think that is a noble use of our military, and I'd still vote. I'd still campaign against it. God help me, I would campaign against it because I don't think. I have personal beliefs about sending people to go kill other people. I don't think we should do that. But if we were going to do that, that's the most noble way we could do it. But nobody's suggesting that. We're sick of war. We had 20 years of it. So why, if nobody's suggesting it, why is Ron DeSantis saying it? To make his constituents worry about it. To make people that he might be able to sway to his side worry about it. It's dishonest on behalf of Russia. The big picture then, what is happening? A political party, the two main contenders to be the candidate for president, leader of the whole country, they're making offers to Russia while lying to the American people and betraying an ally. If it is any consolation, this becomes very easy to read once you start to I guess, empathize with the bigger picture. Understand what people are thinking, feeling, and doing outside of our normal groups. So if you think about what Russia is doing, if you think about our recent history with the Web Brigade, it becomes very easy to identify. This also means you can get MAGA folks thinking about this stuff as well. It's not going to instantly change their minds, but I'll tell you, it sure as hell is going to get them thinking about it the next time they're lied to. And eventually, one of these things will crop up at a time when they're feeling pretty sick of it. And a couple of percentages here and there, a couple of percentage points here and there, is going to do a world of good for the world. So keep mentioning this stuff. Not quite done with this yet. Something else you should make all voters aware of, especially people that call themselves independent voters. Republicans cannot stop projecting. And this is mostly for y'all. But Republicans are incapable of not projecting, and we're going to go into that in the second half of this clip. Let's have a look.